There can be absolutely no doubt that the most broken, overpowered spell in D&D 5th edition is Conjure Woodland Beings. A 4th level spell that allows you to summon a group of pixies that can then polymorph your entire party into T-Rexes, giving you a new hit point pool and crazy damage output. Oh, and this transformation lasts for 1 hour. Of course, you then have Spirit Guardians. This 3rd level spell deals 3d8 damage per round, lasts for 10 minutes, and cuts enemy movement in half. Amazing damage with battlefield control to boot. Once this spell goes up, you will never see a party blitzkrieg faster through a dungeon in all your time as a dungeon master. Oh, but you know what? I forgot about Destructive Wave. This 5th level spell deals 10d6 damage to enemies only in a massive burst around the caster. Of course, a paladin can only get this spell at level 17, so maybe it's not such a big deal, right? Until, of course, you have a College of Lore bard in your group, and they get access to it at level 9. And then, I guess we have Forbiddance, don't we? A level 6 spell that deals 5d10 damage every round against celestials, elementals, fae, fiends, and undead in a massive area that is nearly guaranteed to be big enough to cover an entire dungeon or adventure site. And the spell lasts for 1 day. In the right situation, this one spell will wipe out every enemy in the dungeon. We could also talk about Healing Spirit and how broken it was, and arguably still is, until they nerfed it sometime after it was released. Or we could mention every wizard's favorite spell, Fireball. And do you know what many of these spells have in common? None of them follow the spell design rules published in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Flip to page 284 and you will find a nice chart that lays out spell damage by level and versus one target or multiple targets. Spirit Guardians is level 3. According to the chart, it should do a total of 6d6 damage. Instead, it does 3d8 damage every round for 10 minutes. And it excludes your allies from the damage area of effect. Nice! Destructive Wave is level 5. It should do a total of 8d6 damage. Instead, it's 10d6. Fireball, the chart says 6d6, but it does 8d6. And let's not even talk about Forbiddance. The potential damage of that spell is off the charts. Like literally. Oh, literally. Is it any wonder that spellcasters default to these spells and use them all the time? By the way, let me read something else from the Dungeon Master Guide, page 283, and I quote, "If a spell is so good that a caster would want to use it all the time, it might be too powerful for its level." So the question is, why don't they follow their own rules? Rules that I must assume were drafted to create balance in the game. Either you have one person writing the Dungeon Master Guide and another person writing the spells and they're not talking to each other, or something else is going on. I mean, why would you publish one set of rules but not follow them and do something completely different when you're designing the game? Now, I promise you, I have an actual point besides complaining about the broken stuff in D&D 5th edition. And don't get me wrong, it's an enjoyable game, for sure. I've played it for nearly 10 years now, had loads of fun doing it, creating amazing memories with my friends that I'll never forget. And I still play D&D 5th edition every couple weeks with my Ancient Dragon players. And obviously, thousands of others across the globe play D&D 5th edition and love it, which is exactly why my team and I publish 5th edition GM resources to begin with. In fact, right now, our Layers and Legends 2 Kickstarter, which gives backers the definitive 5e Game Master resource anthology, is about to end. This project has been killing it because it provides everything GMs need to run games for perhaps years to come. Over 30 new 5e adventures spanning levels 1 to 20. Over 100 new monsters players have never seen before. Short encounters, traps, puzzles, new rule sets, and more. These 2 books, Layers and Legends 2 and Loot and Lore 2, contain over 600 pages of game elements that you can drag and drop into your campaign. screen, allowing you to reduce your game time by hours and still run games your players will love. And by the way, these limited edition alt covers will only have one print run as part of this Kickstarter. This is your only chance to get these two beauts for your shelves. Lair's Legends 2 ends this Thursday, so click that link below and grab the package that's right for you. PDFs, Foundry Pack, hardcovers, or get it all with limited time bundled pricing. Now, I will bet my next paycheck that while I was discussing those 4 overpowered spells, that loads of folks were in the comments saying that the fix is simple. The Game Master just needs to make a special ruling, a house rule, to take care of problematic elements. As far as house rulings go, Spirit Guardians only lasts 1 minute, let's say. Destructive Wave is only accessible by level 17 characters, which is probably what the game designers intended. Forbiddance can only be cast over the area the cleric traverses while casting the spell, thus limiting its ability to take out entire dungeons in one fell swoop. Fireball, well, just put innocence in the room. That way wizards will think twice before using it, because you know, it's totally reasonable to have innocent NPCs in every room of an adventure. I'm willing to bet that many dungeon masters have loads of house rules that mitigate the unintended consequences of many of these overpowered spells that too often break the game, if in fact they are unintended. Because the possibility exists that all these OP spells are working as intended. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Now, I personally avoid house rules as much as possible. Instead, I mostly just increase the challenge of encounters to compensate for broken game elements. Or I ask and rely upon my players' good graces to not use OP stuff too frequently. And my players are generally very good about this. And for that, I'm very thankful. Of course, many dungeon masters rely upon the tried and true approach of, if you can do it to me, my monsters can do it to you. So some groups end up playing an arms race of sorts. And yes, that does work to an extent and is a strong-ish argument that OP spells don't break the game as much as I seem to be implying. Because if the monsters can also use those OP spells, what's the real problem? But imagine if nearly every encounter in the game features a shaman who can cast Spirit Guardians, or sorcerers that drop fireballs immediately, or enemy druids that summon pixies that turn all the baddies into T-Rexes. I would argue that that sort of repetitive gameplay would get boring fairly fast for both players and Game Master. In fact, that could be a reason that my players and perhaps your players use some of these OP things a time or two and then move on. Doing it all the time would just get boring for them, so they instead move on to other things that, though less powerful, are new and more interesting. You see, this is one of the big problems when certain spells and abilities are overpowered. They're great fun at first for players and perhaps game masters, but after a while they lead to the continued ongoing use of those same things, and that boredom may result. Unless game master and players decide to de facto nerf themselves. I mean, why do you think it's a meme that all wizards just cast fireball? Which leads us to the question of why game designers might intentionally make certain spells or class features or other game elements overpowered when compared to others. Now we know why it might happen accidentally. Balancing complexity can be extremely challenging, playtesting limitations do exist, and emergent gameplay. That's when game element interactions have unintended consequences that the game designers didn't anticipate. A College of Lore bard getting Destructive Wave might be an example of that. I also think Healing Spirit is an example of that. Within the confines of combat, it was powerful, but not absolutely insane, even though really overpowered for healing spells of that same level. But you take Healing Spirit out of combat though, and that's when it got crazy. Until they patched it, of course. Now, I can't know for certain, but I suspect that the unbalanced nature of spells and other 5e game elements probably has to do with the 4th edition correction. You see, one of the complaints about 4th edition D&D was that all classes and abilities were homogeneous. That is, they all felt the same. And we all know that 4th edition bombed horribly, at least from a sales point of view. So when designing 5th edition, the game designers seemed to take a 180 on almost everything 4th edition did. They even threw out things like minions and skill challenges, which are very good game mechanics. Thus, not all 3rd level spells deal 6d6 damage as the Dungeon Master Guide suggests they should, and so on and so forth. For most of this video, I've been positioning the unbalanced nature of D&D 5e in a negative light. However, I bet there are tons of groups who love that about the game too. I mean, everyone is playing a different game, in so much that what appeals to you is probably different than what appeals to me. There is a variety of different preferences and playstyles after all. So maybe there's really not a problem here at all. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. However, there's still part of me that wishes and hopes and prays that when one D&D or D&D 2024 or D&D 2025, depending on how much they have to delay it, or 6th edition or 5.5 or whatever Wizards of the Coast is going to call it next month, there is a part of me that really wants the next iteration of the game to be a tad more balanced. At least take a pass on some of those spells and abilities that are clearly unbalanced and tend to break the game. You see, as a game master, it can be very frustrating and difficult to deal with these situations. A player is excited beyond belief about a new spell they have access to that can do X, Y, and Z. And then I have to be the bearer of bad news. I'm sorry, but I have a house rule about forbiddance. You can't just cast it and kill everything in the dungeon. No one likes those situations. I'd much rather just gather around the game table with friends and play a solid, tight, well-designed, balanced game system that isn't rife with landmines to be navigated at every turn. Which is frankly one of the reasons I'm loving Pathfinder 2 right now. Anyway, that's just what I think. What do you think? Should D&D be more balanced? And don't forget to back our Layers and Legends 2 Kickstarter before time runs out. You only have until Thursday to back the project, get massive savings, and get your hands on these gorgeous limited edition alt covers. Now, if you'd like to learn my basic approach for creating a D&D campaign from scratch, check out this video right here. And until next time, happy game mastering.